So first of all, comic theory. Comic theory is relatively new in terms of um, academia. It's quite new in terms of its prestige that it's got, and as a result, it's still quite innovative. And there's a lot of people who are doing exciting things in the field. If anyone's interested in any books, I would recommend Ian Wilkes, who is my personal mentor, someone who gives me a lot of guidance. He's got a book called Performing in Comedy. Um, Oliver Double has got loads of stuff about like the comic theory, and Jimmy Carr and Lucy Greaves have also got a book called The Naked Jape. So I put there, dissecting a joke is like dissecting a frog, and the reason why I put that is because this is like a common phrase that people use about like not looking into jokes and not looking into why um, why jokes work and how they work. But I actually haven't. So the phrase is uh, dissecting a joke is like dissecting a frog. The frog dies and nobody laughs, and there is some truth to that. If you dissect a joke, you know the old phrase is that the funniest jokes are the ones that you have to explain, and this is that's true. Like if you're having to explain it, it's probably not quite hit the mark. However, I do have an issue with the dissecting the frog because I think that unlike dissecting a frog, where the frog dies and the joke dies, you can actually turn it into looking at like mechanics, like it's a car engine, and actually you can take the car engine apart, see how it works, and then once you've done that, you can then put the engine back together, and you can also supercharge the engine whilst you're at it. So these are the main comic theories. Okay, so the first one is superiority theory, and that's broken down as humour requiring a victim or a butt of the joke. It comes from a place of superiority, and that superiority doesn't necessarily have to be how it was traditionally, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where it was, maybe a person or a race or a group of people. It can now still take the form of self-deprecation. That superiority can be given to the audience, and actually, as we move forward and we learn that actually, you know, making jokes about certain groups of people is not necessarily where we want to be headed. Superiority theory still works, but it has just evolved along with that to where often you as the comic will make yourself the victim or the butt of the joke, or you would make the oppressor, the government, your local politicians, the situation, the scenario in which you're in. That would ultimately end up being the butt of the joke, versus where we were looking at um, using superiority theory in the 70s, say. Next up, we've got relief. So everybody has the ability to be funny, and with that, um, I say that to every single one of the students who comes into Comedy Lab. Everybody has the ability to be funny, but the difference between being funny off stage and being funny on stage you um, is that you have to create attention. When you go on stage, you will create attention, and by relieving that tension, that is often where laughter is elicited. So in Jimmy Carr's book, The Naked Jape, that I mentioned, they reference this supposed first person who laughed. And if you can imagine a man being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, and he is terrified and is showing all of his teeth, and um, it's very similar to that of a smile, but the look of sheer terror and adrenaline looks very similar to a smile. He's got tension rising in him because he's being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. There is a cliff edge in front of him, and he's running towards the cliff edge. So the tension's rising and rising and rising, and then at the last minute he jumps out of the way, and the saber-toothed tiger goes over the valley, and he is safe. Now all that tension has to go somewhere, and it comes out in a cathartic relief of what would have been the first laugh. And obviously that didn't happen, but that's a way of imagining how you can be tense and release that tension and have laughter. Next up is incongruity. So incongruity is where two things do not mix. So if anyone's been to a restaurant where they've got oil and vinegar, and the oil and the vinegar don't mix, that is a instance of incongruousness. And what happens there is the two liquids can't go together, but they are simultaneously also together. So they're on top of each other in the canister of the vinegar, but they cannot mix. And incongruity theory says that when our minds are presented with an idea of juxtaposing positions, we create a humorous image in our head. An example of that would be the what do you get when you cross um, a kangaroo? Um, um, oh, look, I've messed up a joke on my webinar about jokes. When you cross a kangaroo and a sheep, which is a woolly jumper. So that's two things that are separate, a kangaroo and a sheep, and then they are together in the woolly jumper reference. In the same way that the vinegar and the oil are together in the vinegar canister. Um, and authenticity. So this is the idea that in order for an audience to fully connect, they must be not only familiar with the concept. So when you present an idea, not only do they have to be able to understand it and be familiar with it, but they must also feel like you are familiar and able to understand it in order for it to read correctly and for them to buy into your concept. So these are all things that I wanted to show to you